first of all, podcast is content, so you have to have a strategy for it.
Right.
So it's not about where do you start with the podcast. It's what's our objective, what are we trying to accomplish, who's our audience, and what's the content strategy. If we're going to use podcasts as a medium, what's that podcast strategy going to look like? Is it going to be two people who are on the podcast all the time and they have some expertise and they're sharing that expertise, once a week or once a month or whatever? Or is it going to be, like in my case, my podcast, I'm the host and then I have a guest that I interview. So is it going to be that format? In some cases, maybe it's a podcast with just an individual sharing, their own expertise, or maybe it's a rotation schedule. So you have to start with the goal, content strategy, and then determine the format of the podcast show. Is the podcast going to be for public consumption? Most people assume that it is, but you don't have to create a public podcast. You can create one that's available only inside of your company. Typically, bigger companies do this. It's not for small companies because that's a pretty limited audience. But if you're a mid-sized or large company, you can create a podcast and gate it and make it available only to your employees. It's a great way to deliver content that's very targeted to just your employees. Just one example. So again, the gear, I don't even want to talk about the gear. It's so inconsequential. It's not important. The gear's easy. It's all about the content strategy and the format and what do you want to accomplish? How are you going to measure that? So it's like any other content strategy. You have to think that way. And the other big thing that I want to mention here is focusing on your audience. Who's the audience that you want to reach with your podcast, and what's in it for them? What's the value for them? Because listening to a podcast is what I call windshield time. People either are driving, or they're at the gym, or they're walking their dog, or going for a walk. They're not sitting in front of their computer and tuning everything out and listening to a podcast. People generally don't do that, right? So you're vying for their attention, and so how are you going to get and keep their attention? So focusing on your audience with your content strategy to be delivered through a podcast is really paramount.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a mistake that I think a lot of marketers are making is they'll be so quick to kind of hop on trends or try new things, like video, podcasting, but they don't really, it may not be the best fit for their company because their audience may not even be on those platforms, or they may not even want that sort of content. So
The other thing that I agree with you, the other thing that I would add to that is that, by and large, a podcast takes some time to get off the ground. So you have to go into it. If the podcast medium is going to be a part of your content strategy on a topic or a theme, and you define your audience, you have to go into it with a long-term view. Now, I'm going to define long-term view in general terms of 1 to 2 years, meaning you can't have a podcast and 3 months later go, oh, it's not working. That either you didn't do your strategy right, or you're just being unrealistic to expect it to explode in 3 months. However you define explode, right? You really have to give it a good solid year, and along the way you want to be measuring and making progress and understanding what's working, what's not, right? But you gotta have a long term plan for it.